Hey guys, can you remember American Crime Story, The People versus O.J Simpson, episode 4, 100% not guilty, and holy shit, I mean, this episode was crazy, really. This show is getting so intense, and I not realize how intense this trial really is becoming. I mean, really, this is becoming one of the most intense shows on TV, and I'm loving every second of it. By far the best episode of the season. I mean, there was so much great stuff in this episode, a lot of confrontations episode, a lot of changes made to the case, just everything about it I loved. But let's just get into it. And I really think this show benefits more from when it's longer. And a lot of FX shows do. Some don't. Sons of Anarchy. A lot of shows don't benefit from when they're longer. But this is a show that does benefit from when it's longer because they have more time for things. And I definitely really like that. I like this episode was about 50 something minutes. But let's just get into this episode because it was amazing. Like I said, by far best episode of the season. And I'm just loving every minute of this show. So we see a party going on. Everyone's dancing around when Simpson was back in his prime. We see that he's just doing coke off of ladies. I mean, he's just dancing. Like, everything's great. And it was interesting to see it this way. But then we cut back to him now in his cell, throws the tray on his table in anger, puts his head on his hands, and you just really see how broken and lost Simpson is. He's realizing that this isn't my life anymore. I can't go back to those fun times because now I'm trapped in this cell and I can't really do anything else with my life. And it really sucks, honestly. You have to feel bad for guy. Even though the guy may be a mass murderer, you do have to feel bad for him because of the fact that he is trapped in the cell and he really has no other way of getting out of there. So Shapiro then introduces Cochran to the team, or introduces them to two more lawyers, Carl Douglas and Sean Chapman, who really don't have too much to do yet, but I'm sure as the case goes on, they will have more to do. We do see some stuff from Carl Douglas, like Carl does have some lines. Sean really has nothing to do. I don't know if she's going to have stuff to do. We'll see. Shapiro says he's honored to have them join the team, then asks if any of them think Simpson did it. No one raised their hand, and Lee says that they need to talk big picture strategy. He says that their priority is the jury, which is downtown, a heavy concentration of African Americans. And Cochran says that black men are their allies, and Simpson's a hero in the community, and he's confident that they will assume he couldn't commit such a ghastly crime. But black women, however, may be a problem because they don't want black men to marry white girls. That's just something they very much are against, which I thought was very interesting the way that he looked at this. And he says that the accusation is accurate. Black women resent black men marrying outside the community, and they need to limit that group. And Shapiro said it's a smart analysis, and the prosecution thinks that they have an upper hand, but they don't because they have him, and he knows how these people think. And basically, they just need to contradict everything they say. And Cochran tells them that he needs to be careful in what he calls them. And Shapiro says the most important thing, because he just referred to black people as these people, which is definitely not a great term. Cochran tells him basically they need to be more careful. Shapiro said the important thing is that they work together when they face the preliminary judge. They got to come out swinging, and nothing will be admitted without challenge and provocation. And basically, anything that someone says, they just need to contradict. So at the preliminary hearing, Marcia says that they request a hair sample to compare hairs found at the scene of the crime. Cochran says they have great concerns about this request and asks the court limit the sample to only what was required for testing. She says they need at least 100 hairs to compare hairs from the defendant, and of course Cochran is outraged by this, and they're going back and forth on how much hair to sample. He even says that they might need one hair, which Marcia thinks is pretty ridiculous that they're just going back and forth on this, but I mean, you can just tell that they're ready to just, judge everything. They're ready to just call her out and everything and do whatever they can with that. So basically, Cochran and Marsh go back and forth, and the judge asks for a hearing on the hair. Simpson is then told in his cell he has a visitor, and it's Cochran, and basically, we get by far one of the best scenes this episode was this scene. This scene was amazing. I mean, I'll say this. If Courtney B. Vance is not nominated for an Emmy after the scene, I don't know what's going to happen because he was incredible here. Simpson asks where Robert is. Cochran says he had a dinner, which Simpson's upset about since his dinner consists of slop, and then he kept running to the toilet, but it's plugged up. And Cochran tells him that he needs to be strong and assures him that they will get him out of jail. Cochran says that he's a mess and he can't walk into a courtroom like this. Everyone is going to be watching. And Simpson says everyone thinks he's guilty, and Cochran says he can change their minds and asks if he remembers who he is and what he means to people. Simpson says nothing, and then Cochran thinks back to this story, which I really love. It honestly made me like Cochran more as a character. In 1979, he had just left private practice to get the first black attorney in office, but it didn't happen, still rigged. He felt powerless, and his first marriage blew up in his face. His children wouldn't talk to him. He was failing at work. He was failing at everything, and just his life sucked. And He then watched Simpson on the field, and it became as if he was running for him. It motivated him. It showed what he could do. And Simpson smiles as he scored a touchdown that day. And Cochran says when they cut to commercial, he was on again, breaking another barrier with charisma, humor, and intelligence. A black man as a public face for one of the world's biggest corporations. And you have to, in 1979, that wasn't really that big of a thing. So you have to remember how big of a deal that really was. And Simpson says that they lost that game, and Cochran says he doesn't remember that. He remembers everything else because it didn't have anything to do with what touched him. And when the game was over, he got back to work, and he would have been stopped and wallowed by self-pity since. He tells him he is O.J. Simpson, a fighter, a runner, and when he gets down, he needs him right back up because this right here is the run of his life. And I love that scene. Amazing stuff from Courtney B. Vance. He killed in that scene. So then we get more focus on Lance Ito in this episode. We kind of focused on Lance Ito a bit in the first episode, but we had like that one scene with him. Here, we start to understand why his character is so important and why he's the main character. We see he goes to his wife Margaret, tells her to come in, tells her that they have signed him Simpson. She congratulates him and kisses him. He says that they chose him over a number of candidates, and that he was the best choice with his integrity, open mind, and especially strong backbone. She says he'll be under a lot of scrutiny, and he says he's not intimidating. What's most important is that they have all the facts, and says the trial needs to be pure truth school and let them all see the available facts so they can make the right decision. He says that she just needs to fill out the spousal conflict form, and she looks at detectives he'll be working with and then sees Furman's name and looks very concerned, but then just says nothing. She tells Lance that nothing rings a bell, signs her name, and it's clear that there's something that happened with her and Furman. We just don't really know what happened. We know that Furman obviously is a very hard guy to work with based on what we heard last week, but it's clear something happened there. We just don't know what that's all about, and I'm very interested in seeing what exactly happened with Furman, because clearly there was something. We just don't know what it is, and that very much interests me. Why does she have, concerns over Mark Furman, but she really didn't say anything to him here? So, at the trial, Lance is the judge, calls Simpson to the stand, and asks if he's ready to plea. He says he is. He asks how he intends to plea, counts 1 and 2, and Simpson says he is absolutely 100% not guilty. Shapiro tells Lee he loves Cochran, but they need to keep their eyes on him, and Lee agrees he's an excellent lawyer and can sense all the potholes. Shapiro says he doesn't want him putting ideas into Simpson's head, and says there's only one way out of the case, and the reality is that it's not winnable. In this episode, something else I loved, just like I've loved all season, that we really get everyone's points about this, and especially between Cochran and Shapiro. There's a lot going on between these two, and I really like seeing that. And basically, Lee asks if he really will, and Shapiro says the race car is sticking, and Cochran equals LAPD injustice, and Gil doesn't want to see the city burn down again. And the waitress brings them their food, and Lee asks who he is to invoice his hours to and who he should bill. And Shapiro says that he is pre bono, and Lee says that he should remind him he was his first call. And Shapiro says he likes this case for him. It's a terrific way to get back in the limelight, reintroduce himself to the public, and Lee says he doesn't need that because he's already had all these other big cases, so people know his name, they know he's out there, he doesn't really need a reintroduction. Shapiro says it was a long time ago, and says this could be the most high-profile criminal case in the history of the world. Simpson is easily the most famous American to be put up for murder, and it's a different world now. And I like this scene here. He says, in the old days, you turn on the TV, 6 p.m. the news, and now it's 24 hours a day, which, yeah, now you can get news 24 hours a day, and he says he will die on this for the rest of his life, and Lee says one of his former clients paid and Simpson didn't. So we realize that Lee's not being paid for this. Even though he's part of this, he's not being paid, and that's something he obviously is very upset about. So we then see Faye, and Faye Resnick, by far, this is the episode where Faye Resnick has the most to do, and I really do love Connie Britton in this role. I think she really does a great job here. You understand that Faye obviously is very uneasy and very just not herself after what happened with Nicole, but no, she seems pretty chill, honestly, what happened. I mean, she basically, two writers telling him that Nicole was her everything, she was her confident and spiritual sister, and now there's such a void in her life without her. She went to a psychic and says that Nicole wants her to write a book, so she's going to do that, and she tells the writer she doesn't want to be exploitative. One of the writers, Viner, says that they need to move fast and have to get press in 2 weeks. And the other writer asks for an overview of times with Nicole, and she snorts coke as she tells them that Nicole was a wonderful person, a terrific mother, and they had many fun times together. And they find out that Faye has a cocaine problem, and she says she's trying to manage it. She says she tried to give a Brentwood hello, where she would go into a guy's bedroom when he was asleep and go down on him. The writer says they're going to sell a lot of books in a non-exploitative way, and basically you see that she really wants to write this book, which is very interesting. So Darden's with Lane and Van Adder, who tells them that AC says he was trying to keep Simpson alive, but the evidence says that Simpson was playing across into Mexico. With all the evidence, we have things like a fake passport, a mustache, fake beard, makeup adhesive, and Van Adder says it was the passport to his wife's grave, and Lang asks what Robert has to say. Darden says he's Simpson's lawyer, so he doesn't really get to talk. He have to talk, which sucks because obviously he'd be the one person to go to. And Darden asks them what they have to do, what they have with the Bahamas, and Van Adder says the crew is expecting Simpson on the 18th, the day after the Bronco. They then see, basically, after the Bronco, so they have this information as well. And then we get probably the most heartbreaking scene in this episode by far. We see Goldman's family coming crying. Marcia tells them to come in, and everything about the scene I totally do agree with, because think about everything we've been hearing on the show. It's all been Simpson Nicole, Simpson Nicole. No one's really talked about Goldman, and I like that this, his father, Fred, really got into this. He asked if she really knows what he's going through, and basically he says that if she had a son that was murdered, Ron is dead, and it's like no one even cares. Turns on the TV, it's just Simpson and Nicole, and it's like Goldman is a footnote to his own murder, and they talk about him they make him seem like some kind of joke. It's all very superficial. Talk about the various jobs that they've made up to ruin his name, which Fred thinks they're trying to do, like he was asking them, and he asks her if she knows what he did in his spare time. He volunteered at a clinic for children with cerebral palsy. He was a good person and steered clear of drugs and drinking. He should be celebrated, not the way he's being. And he says when the police called and said Goldman had been killed, he assumed that it was a car accident. Never in his worst nightmare could he imagine what this monster did to him. And he prays that, he says that he was stabbed so many times, and just hearing the father's concerns over this and hearing what happened to his son, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It really is. And I think they really did this very well, because no, they haven't talked about Goldman a lot. We haven't really heard about him since the first episode. I mean, we've heard about him here and there, but not really since the first episode. And I really like that they did talk about this, because yeah, this is a problem. They should have talked about Goldman more. Goldman is just as important as Nicole, and basically, the father has a right to be very upset. I like seeing that. I thought that was a very good scene. I really like the way that this was done. And basically, Marcia grabs his hand, tells him that they're gonna get Simpson, and he says they better, and it's just a great scene. It really shows that their fight is stronger. Marcia then goes to see Bill and Gil says that he's decided to take death penalty off the table. She says they can't do that. What he did was unspeakable, and it's special circumstances. They want death-qualified jurors who are more aggressive and more likely to convict, and he says that they have to be more realistic. People love Simpson, and she says that they have to, be, people won't after what they see the crime scene photos, and he says that he has no doubt they won't, but no one can execute Simpson. Said they couldn't even execute Charlie Manson, which is very interesting, which is true, they couldn't. So Gil says the good news is that Donald Vincent has offered his services to the case for free. She said they don't need his help, and Gil says that he practically invented jury research, and that he'd be a good person to have on their team. And she says if she can make the jury black women, they'll be in good shape, because they will sympathize with Nicole. She says she has handled case after case of battered black women, and she'll be able to make the connection to Simpson's abuse led to murder. And Gil says she's probably right, but it doesn't hurt to be open to outside input. So they go see Vincent, who's talking to a bunch of the people that want to be jury about Simpson, and the black side of the jury thinks he's innocent, while the white side thinks that he did it, which isn't a huge thing, but honestly did make a lot of sense, because Bilden says it's worse than he thought, and they watched the preliminary hearing, asked the jury for their impressions on Marcia based on what they've seen, and this was very interesting, and I love the way the scene was done. This is probably the first episode that doesn't portray Marcia as, ruthless and fearless, and just, nothing really gets to her as it is. This is the first episode where we really see that Marcia is very flawed, and this stuff really is getting to her, which I really think Sarah Paulson did very well here. I definitely really liked. And basically, Vincent tells her that black women do not like her, and basically we see that they think that she, is a bitch and very shifty and strident and a real know-it-all. I mean, this really is getting her, even though she told Darden these cases don't get to me. You really see the look in her face. She's really concerned about her appearance, and it's understandable. I mean, when she's dealing with these women, she wants to be able to talk to them in a respectful manner, and she doesn't want to be ridiculed about it. And obviously, knowing that they don't like her, that's a huge problem, which, yeah, it really is. So Vincent tells her black women do not like her, which she does not understand, understand since she has worked with countless black women before and won. And he says the data doesn't bear that out, and she says his data is horseshit, and she says some of those black women still write her letters, and he says a good anecdotal information, but it would be wise to limit the number of black women on her jury, and she should also consider softening her appearance a little bit. Her skirts instead of business suits, a new hairdo, maybe try smiling a bit more. I mean, he's really trying to give her, I think, good advice, but this is just not who she is. This is who Marcia is, and they don't like who she is. They don't want her to be herself. They want her to be someone she's not, which I thought is very interesting that we found this out here. So the jury expert for Shapiro then tells him that Simpson was spoken highly of, while Nicole is a gold digger, which Robert says is completely wrong. She loved Nicole, she loves Simpson, and that's not how she felt about him at all. So Faye is giving more details for her book to the writers, talks about how Nicole and Simpson had crazy sex and was a problem after the breakup. He even used to watch her have sex with other guys, which I honestly could believe. I think that's very interesting. She says that they were the most divorced couple she ever knew, which is very interesting that she said that. So Darden goes to see Marcia, and I really am loving this friendship between Darden and Marcia. I mean, there's some of the more lighter scenes in the episode. This is a very heavily dark show that we need some light scenes every now and again. So I like that we're getting these nice scenes between Darden and Marcia. These are two people that respect each other very much. They really have nothing against each other, and they're probably the only ones that really aren't at each other's throats in this episode. So she tells him the jury selection begins tomorrow. They've called 900. She says she'll be there all night while Shapiro eats dinner in a restaurant she can't afford. And it really shows like how different these two are. Marcia's just some woman that works in this case and is just doing this because it's her job, while Shapiro is extremely famous and has worked on all these cases before. And Marcia has too, but she's just not as fortunate. And basically, he says he wants to know where they were with AC, and she says she's so distracted she meant to talk to him. Simpson is swallowing everything up, and because of the evidence, Gil thinks that they should drop it. She says he's done a great job. She says she'll offer him a drink. She tells him that the trial is so crazy. Usually people are offering up every excuse to get out of serving on a long case, but here she has to work through the crackpots and the intention seekers, and they're asking 294 questions, we find out, because there are just so many parts to it. And she says that Simpson's second biggest problem is that the dream team, they're all going to tear up each other and implode, and he says it may be true for all the white guys, but he wouldn't be so quick to judge Cochran. We know that him and Cochran had some sort of a relation. We find out that she thinks that he's all fake and everything, but he says that he's real. Cochran's a showboat, but at the end of the day, he fights for community. He talks like a preacher because he goes to church every Sunday, and he says when he started SID, when he had a question, he'd always be his first call. They were on the same side fighting bad cops, just coming at it from different angles, and says to not underestimate him, and I was a really great scene. I definitely really love that. So Lee tells Cochran he's known Shapiro for a long time. He's the godfather of his oldest son, but he does not have the proper appetite for the case. He said that they are creatures of the courtroom. That's where a case is won, not by settling like a pussy like Shapiro is. And he says they owe it to their clients to take it to the finish line, and it's time for him to make a move. So he's going to have Cochran really play a big role here. So at the jury selection, Marcia says the crowd's as chaotic as the casting for Scarlett O'Hara and Gone with the Wind, which, I mean, that really is crazy, her comparing it to that. I mean, if you guys know how crazy that casting was, I mean, that's crazy. So Bill says the trial of the century. Shapiro says it's as bad as tickets for a Lakers game, and Carl says that they're about to be sequestered for a year. Lance welcomes them to the jury selection. We see all the applicants go up while Marcia and Cochran ask them questions. Cochran asks what the tally is, feels that they are targeting too many blacks, and Robert says it seemed pretty balanced to him. Shapiro says he agrees with him, it's ridiculous and he should inform the press. Cochran agrees, but he doesn't feel he's the most ideal person to speak out in it, that he feels he should do it. And Shapiro says that he's the lead attorney, he'll do the press conference, and if you guys can't tell, by the end of this episode, Shapiro's a control freak. He wants control, he wants the upper hand, he wants to be in charge, and he speaks out at the press conference. Cochran gets a shoe shines interview by many reporters. He talks about the problems with the jury and everything, and Marcia says it's complete bullshit. Gil says he doesn't care if it's true. He's more concerned about perception. The optics with Cochran taking a role, it would make sense for them to balance out their ticket and stir in a little flavor. And Bill asks if he's talking about a black person, and Gil says he didn't say that, but it's not a bad idea. And a third chair give their team something extra. And Marcia offers up Darden, which would make sense. He's no longer working anything. They have a good relationship. It would just make sense for Darden to work with them, which again is going to create a lot of problems though, because of course Cochran's working on the other side, and we know that Darden and Cochran really did have a bond before. So Simpson asks Shapiro why is it taking so long and tells him he missed Halloween. He didn't get to take his kids trick-or-treating, and now Thanksgiving's coming up. Shapiro says it's going to be hard. They're told the judges want to see them, and Lance tells them they have a problem, shows them Faye's book. He says their book could have major ramifications on jury selection. And something I really like about this episode, by the way, is that we really get to see all of the characters finally interact for once, which we've been seeing kind of, but not in the way we have here. We've heard their opinions. We didn't really get to see Shapiro and Marcia have a scene together, and in this episode we do. Shapiro says it could make it impossible for Simpson to get a fair trial. Marcia says that they don't know that. Shapiro says that it could, and Lance says that they should order up some copies, and he's temporarily stalling the jury selection because they don't know what this book could say. It could really make them look bad, and Marcia and Bill didn't read the book. Marcia says they're doing coke on every other page, and Bill says that he will never think of Brentwood the same way again. Lance annotates and highlights sections of the book, which was a very good thing to do, because obviously he doesn't know what's in it, so obviously he's very worried. And Shapiro says this is very bad. Robert says that Faye has it all wrong, minus a few things. Simpson says she's a liar. Faye says that Nicole had 6 abortions, so she wouldn't have another kid with him, and he knows Nicole wouldn't do that. He says he can't even read it, and Cochran says the book is trash and will be forgotten in a week. Faye's then on Larry King, which I gotta say, I love the fact that Larry King is playing Larry King just with a wig so he looks younger, which is a really cool idea. And saying she told the story so that women could break the chain of violence, and if this book can inspire one wife or one girlfriend to escape an abusive relationship, then any embarrassment she's endured is a small price to pay. And Marcia is watching this. I think Marcia understands that, but it just wasn't a good idea for her to write this book when the trial's going on. Just wasn't a good idea, because now it's really ruined things. Lance tells them he's ready to resume jury selection tomorrow. Shapiro says that Simpson has been unfairly tried in the media, and the well has polluted, and they should postpone the trial till next year and allow Simpson to be released on bail. And Marcia says that it's his fault, which, yeah, it kind of is, that he is holding all these press conferences, and they leaked the Furman story, they played the race card, and Shapiro says he would never reduce himself to such cheap tricks. Lee tells him to calm down. Shapiro says that race will never be an issue in the case, and Cochran says it's not that simple. This is the USA, and they're defending a black man who is fighting through his innocence, and he knows that they know how black men have been targeted throughout history. And Cochran says they didn't introduce that into this trial, but they would not be doing their job if they don't at least talk about how race plays a part in this trial, and that is playing the race card. And if that is playing the race card, so be it. And I do agree with Cochran that this is an issue. This is something they need to address, and they can't just not address it. This is something that is a problem. So Lee is then on Larry King, and basically after this, Shapiro tells Cochran to never contradict him again, and Cochran says he doesn't himself. And I really like this tension that's going on between Shapiro and Cochran, because in many ways Shapiro is doing it to himself. If Shapiro wasn't such a control freak, then things would not be as bad. But Shapiro just wants to be in control so much and wants to control pretty much every aspect of this case that he's not going to let anyone else have a say, really, and he's going to make all the decisions, which isn't the best way to go here. I mean, you really do see that Cochran knows what he's doing. He's just as, he's just as capable of doing this, as Shapiro is, and he should be able to do this case. And even though, obviously Shapiro doesn't agree with that. So Marcia says that the people accept the panel as presently constituted, and basically Cochran says that they accept the jury, and basically Cochran then talks to Simpson as next door neighbor. The Salingers have a maid, and this is very interesting. We see after this. Oh, I forgot to read this. At the jury selection, Shapiro tells them they're in great shape and they had 4 black women, but Cochran feels that they should have more, and he tells Lance they're excusing a juror and put a black woman in her place, and Marcia tells Bill the juror she likes, and Bill says it would be nice to have a white guy, and Marcia says they shouldn't be hung up on skin color. They're smart people who have good answers, and I like that she's not really thinking about them based on skin color. She's thinking them based on people. So Cochran then talks to Simpson about his next door neighbor. The Salingers have a maid, and she was walking their dog that night and saw the Bronco parked outside at 10:15. And if they can get to her to testify, it will decimate the prosecution stop line. And Simpson says that this is what he's been telling them all along. He couldn't have done it. And Shapiro says he's so sorry he's late, but he has something considerable to offer. He said he's been doing some research at the office about precedent and possible options, and he thinks that they should cut a deal and should go for manslaughter. And he goes over this ridiculous story that Simpson's gonna somehow say that he was so mad at Nicole that he just killed her in, just by accident, and it's ridiculous. It really is. And after the meeting, Cochran, Robert, and Carl agree that Shapiro is an arrogant prick, and Cochran says that since Shapiro's going on vacation tomorrow, they will clear out everything in the office, staples, files, boxes, everything. They want to start over. They don't think he knows what he's doing. And I do agree, he doesn't really know what he's doing. And Shapiro then tells Linnell that the trip couldn't come soon enough because he very much dislikes Cochran. Linnell asks if he saw the LA Times that said Nicole went to a battered women's shelter 5 days before the murder. She says it's all anyone talked about at work, and they keep playing the 911 calls over and over, and he says he knows the case will never end. She says that she thinks he should quit, and he says that it's what he does. He can't take on a double homicide and then run away from it. And she says that this is different. Her friends don't call her back. Everybody thinks he's guilty, and he says that he knows that, and he tells her he's sorry it's affecting her this way, but he's way more worried about how it will affect them later. And if he doesn't put a lid on it, Cochran, if he doesn't put a lid on Cochran, the city is doomed. And he tells her that they should just go away and have a beautiful weekend. And she says that he's afraid that there are going to be more riots. And Marcia comes into Darden's office. And I like that scene there. I like the scene here between, Linnell. You can tell that Linnell doesn't really trust her husband either. She thinks that he, is just worried about things and isn't really working very well on this. And Marcia comes into Darden's office, asks if he has a minute, basically tells him about the position that she has, and he rightfully accepts. Obviously, he's going to accept it because he hasn't really had anything to do, and finally he's involved in this case, and I love seeing that. So Simpson says he doesn't understand the way he's been depicted. Well, Darden did have a say in this case before, but he basically was just getting information from AC. Now he's actually playing a major role, which I like seeing. So Simpson says he doesn't understand the way he's being depicted, and Robert says he needs to make a change. He prays for him every day, but he thinks Cochran should be the lead attorney. He's just better at what he does, and he'd be better suited for him. And Simpson asks what Shapiro says, and Robert says to not worry about him. Simpson asks how these things work because he's not good at conflict things. And Robert says that this is his life and freedom. Cochran is his best chance, and he's got to trust him. Shapiro then goes to his office and asks his secretary, Linda, where she put his files, and he realizes that Cochran's team took all of them. Shapiro is obviously outraged, says to get him on the phone, he wants a meeting right now, and she says that he already called one and shows him a newspaper article from the Daily News that says he's been benched, and Cochran is now the head of the case. Cochran says they lost the motion to suppress the evidence at Rockingham, and Lee says it's like Lance says something against them. Dershowitz says they'll file the motion and throw out the lab results. Shapiro arrives, and he says before they get into his agenda, they need to get into his, and I know people haven't said that John Travolta's good here, but I really thought he did a great job in this scene. You really see the madness of Robert Shapiro. He really is crazy in this. I mean, he really wants that power. He's power hungry. He wants to be in power, and if he's not, he goes crazy. So Cochran says that Simpson's on the phone. Shapiro says they have more pressing issues to discuss because there are some stinky fish in the room. He says everyone knows they have to keep a united front, so from now on, he is the one that speaks for the defense team, and he is the lead attorney, and he doesn't want to hear anything about it. And Robert asks Simpson if he has anything to add, and he says that this reminded him of the days of football when he didn't get along, but they had to work as a team when it came to game day. Shapiro says he doesn't follow, and Simpson says he's the quarterback. Cochran's the running back, or maybe Shapiro's the coach, and Lee's the quarterback, and Dershowitz is the front office, and Robert says he needs to be more clear about what he's saying. Opening statements are a month away. Shapiro says as the attorney, he will be delivering those statements and asks Simpson if they're clear. And Lee says he feels Cochran is the more respectable attorney to deliver the opening statement. Given the makeup of their jury, he can transform the message into a downtown dialect that would resonate more powerfully with their audience. And he just feels that, he obviously thinks Shapiro's good, but he just feels that Cochran, when it comes to that, would be better at it because he knows really what they're going through and he really knows how to speak for Simpson on his part, which I do agree with. So Dershowitz says he agrees, so does Barry, and Robert asks who he thinks should do it, and he says to have Cochran do it. Cochran then gives them attorney assessments, and Shapiro's infuriated since he has really no control over this, and you can tell that this is probably the first time he's really no control over anything, and they then go into the courtroom. Cochran notices Marcia has recruited Darden for the case. Simpson asks since when they got a black guy, and that's how the episode ends, and what an incredible episode. I mean, there's so much to love about this episode. First of all, the whole situation with Shapiro, just get a grip. Seriously, get a grip. I mean, he's in power, and there's really nothing that he can do about the Cochran's in power. But I really do like this conflict developing between these two, because I think Cochran has some good points, while Shapiro does as well. He was the first one called. He should get to make the call. I understand that. I don't think that, well, I'll say this, I think Shapiro's a dick. I definitely think that he does have some, he does have some points there where he's saying, I was in power first, I was here first, it would just make sense. I understand all that. But Cochran is very good at what he does, and they shouldn't deny that he is very good, and I think that Shapiro should at least consider picking him for this, because I think he do a very good job with that, and I like seeing that Simpson shows Cochran, and Shapiro really has no control over that, which I do like seeing. The whole thing with Darden and Cochran, this is going to get very interesting. We saw in the promo that Cochran is going to confront Darden Obviously, they're going to confront each other. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. I am definitely interested in seeing that. That definitely is one of the things that I'm most looking forward to next week. And just the tension between the dream team in general. What Marcia is saying would happen is basically happening. They're getting, well, basically Cochran and Shapiro. The others seem to be getting along well, but I don't think that's going to last for long either, because we know that Robert very much dislikes Shapiro. We know that Dershowitz dislikes him. We know that Lee really dislikes him, and they just don't want to work with him. So they definitely think that Cochran's better at what he does, and I'm definitely interested in seeing how that's going to go. I definitely like the way that that's going. This whole situation then with Faye. What is going on with Faye's tell-all book? I think Marcia understands why she wrote it, but it is obviously a problem because she can't have this book around when they're supposed to be getting all of this, all this information and stuff. It's delaying them, it's ruining things, and they need to find a way to fix that so it's not interfering with as much as it is. I like seeing Marcia's reputation this episode, that people don't really like her. They think that she's bitchy. They think that she's just not a good person. I think it's very interesting the way we're seeing that, because that is the way I think people depicted Marcia. In fact, I asked my mom, who's also watching the show, how she felt about Marcia Clark, and my mom even said, I never really cared for Marcia Clark very much, and you can tell in this episode that a lot of people felt the same way, and I found that to be very interesting as well. I like that we're getting that side of seeing how people really feel about Marcia. That's something that's very interesting. In an upcoming episode, Marcia, I'm pretty sure that's what the entire episode is going to be. Is it going to be about how people really depict Marcia? Which I do like seeing. Very interesting stuff there. And then the whole thing with Linnell. Linnell doesn't seem to really support Shapiro that much either. She thinks that he wants to be in power. She wants him to get off this case, which obviously he's not going to do, because I think his one fear is that he is not in control of this case. God forbid he's not. But Linnell seems to not really want him in this case either, which is very interesting, and I do like seeing that. But overall, guys, amazing episode. Loving this show. Just great stuff every single week. This is one of the shows I look forward to most watching every week. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Shameless. And I will see, which, yes, I know I haven't reviewed Shameless all week, but I am going to review it. I'm going to catch up on all the TV shows today. Shameless, Arrow, Pretty Little Liars, Teen Wolf, Lucifer, Supergirl, all those. I will catch up on those today, and I will see you guys for those reviews. Okay, bye.